Barbados. Good evening, everyone. It is 5:30, so we're going to get started. Welcome to tonight's Educational Programs and Services Committee. I'm your chair, Emily McCormick, and with me I have Trina Sharschmidt and JP Prego and Melanie Cunningham, along with Dr. Farina, Carol Givlin, Amy Boyle, and Mr. Flynn. Hello. And I'm sorry, I can't remember your name.
Christine Campbell.
Christine Campbell. Thank you, Christine.
Sorry, Andrea.
She didn't add you. It's her fault.
She's at it now.
Yes. Excellent. Okay.
It's like the meeting.
I'll start with looking for approval of the January 16th meetings.
Motion.
Fantastic. Second. Any questions or discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passed. Next up, it's all you, Mr.
I know.
Mannion.
All right, so
Just in 20 slides.
hello and back. I had like 30 slides last time. I've cut it down to 20 for tonight. We have a couple different topics that we're going to cover tonight. It's February, so we just finished our marking period 2 or mid-year TSI data review and input into the CPP. I always want to say FRRCP. I always say it wrong. The Future Ready Comprehensive Planning Portal. We have to enter our data quarterly, so I want to share that out, and then we have to talk about Algebra 1. So. The first thing that I threw this slide in here because Dr. Farina and I were both interested in trying to get more information, and Dr. Farina can speak to this as much as I can, but there was one area that our students were indicating that they were not meeting expectations regarding to a combined growth score between Algebra 1 and literature. So TSI, your performance is based on, it does not include Keystone Biology, it includes Keystone Literature and Keystone Algebra 1. And the performance last year indicated that while we were below in literature, we were above in algebra. And so we were unsure why we were being identified as still staying on TSI for growth, because that averages out to being pretty much a neutral. If you average the two of them together, it's pretty neutral. It's about a 0. But what we were able to find out, and this is good information for us to consider it here in this committee as well as just in our planning purposes, is that the way that the growth score is calculated is based on 2 years worth of data for TSI. So if you look at the growth score from 2022-2023, which is the year before I started, and obviously I came in April, this is 2 years ago, you can see the difference in the negative number for literature, for example, was a negative growth index of negative 4.34, which was well below the state threshold. And you saw in algebra it was a 1.0, which is it's above, but if you take that and you average that in with last year's data, we still skewed much further into the negative growth average as related to the growth index than we originally, like I think the two of us were really looking at our calculations. So one thing I can say from this data that I think is important is that if you look at last year's performance, we gained 2.5% of growth in literature alone.
But that's compared to the negative
the year
4.
before.
Okay.
So we were at negative 4.34 and we went to negative 1.87. So that's about a 2.5% increase in performance. Well, it's still below. It moved us out of the well below category and into the next tier. And then in algebra, we gained another 0.66%. So the beauty of this, I should say, or the clarity that this provides is that after this year, 22-23 comes off, and our averages will be calculated based on 2024 last year and this current academic year based on that performance. Go ahead if I missed anything.
And I would
Sorry.
just say, I think when we got that information, we were alarmed because on the
That is
surface,
an alarming number, well below
Well,
negative.
correct, that we did not know that was being used, right? So on the Future Ready portal, you'll see, and you've seen it for years here, where we're like, it's blue, it's great, there's so much growth, and we're like, we're above the state average in all subgroups, their performance, and even achievement. So how can you still be in TSI? And so I emailed the Secretary of Education, because that seemed like the only way to get the answer. And, because we're always told it's this very sophisticated formula. And I'm like, okay, well, I would love to know what the sophisticated formula is.
Oh, me too.
It's not sophisticated at all. It's 2 years combined, and it's essentially the average. And I'm like, well, that doesn't seem sophisticated,
Yep.
although we didn't know you were doing that.
Okay.
And so now, and it's not just clarity for the high school, it's clarity for all administrators, because now we're pulling down those PVOS growth indices for all of the buildings and all of the subgroups that we're required to report on, and it paints a little bit different picture for us. It was an aggressive email.
Yeah, I mean, one of the.
I think we can handle it. Give us the math.
I think another key component is that if you do get put on TSI, what this does show us in a large sense is that you're probably looking at a 2-year commitment, at least, if not 3-year commitment, regardless of how your performance increases. Because until your low performing year comes off, whatever triggered the TSI, until that comes off your data completely, it's very difficult to maneuver your performance in a way that's going to kick you off. Now, this all hinges on a continuing positive, continued improvement. But it's a nice, I don't want to say nice, it's a necessary thing to know that I think provided a little bit of a different conversation for us, when we were kind of doing our mid-year debrief as a staff, as well as, being, re-identified for next year. So that is, we just wanted to share that. We thought that was good information to have.
Good information to have, and information that we did not have previously.
Correct.
And, when I first saw that, I started to get a little agita because, well, I haven't seen it before, but if you haven't seen it before either, then.
So we see this. What we didn't know was the calculation behind it, right? So we assumed that it was a year of growth. They were looking year over year. No, it's actually, they're holding on, they're banking a year, and we're like, oh, well, that makes a difference.
Yeah.
That makes a difference
Yeah.
in the calculation.
Yeah.
So,
And you get 1 year performance where a certain subgroup of students that might have a really small number in their subgroup, you have 1 dip year in performance, and at any given time, you could trigger to be identified for that subgroup, not for all of your students, but for that one underperforming group. So it's an interesting perspective, and just kind of wanted to start out before we share the data from right now with this, just for us to consider. So.
and it asks additional questions like, so why are you combining them? They're very different content areas. We'll wait for the answer for that.
Okay. Stay tuned. Don't hold your breath.
And this is, there are questions that we're having across the county, and just, everybody, because there's buildings in a lot of districts that are on a TSI improvement plan, and trying to figure out the calculations is a very interesting discussion, just because everybody's like, well, how did you get there? Or, hey, I think my data says this. It's an interesting discussion. So
For something that they keep track, I don't know why it's a secret.
Well, it was asked because you're required to go to the meeting, and again, they told a district we would go to these mandated meetings, and they're like, well, it's very sophisticated calculation, and I wanted to type in the chat, or simple math.
I think the way to get that number is sophisticated,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so I sat in on those meetings, or they tried to explain it to us, and we're all like,
that I still
On the
don't quite
surface,
understand.
that PVOS, like that
Yeah.
stuff is sophisticated,
Yeah.
and the
but
psychometrics
this
behind it,
thing
I don't,
is not.
no,
Okay.
no.
You want to trend in a positive direction in growth, and that's generally like the goal. So the goal is if we are at, we gain 2.5% there, we want to gain, if we gain even another %, we're trending in a really good direction. So that's kind of the conversation we had as a staff once we got this information too. So it was an important kind of piece of clarity for us. So on to the data here. So our first goal, as you guys remember, is 9th grade credit accrual. It's designed, 9th graders being successful accruing credits is one of the top predictors for long-term high school success. So our target for the end of the year was 95% of our 9th grade class would accrue 6 credits, because the graduation requirement for them is 24 credits at a minimum. So we want them to be able to track 6 credits per year. So if the year ended today, we have 22 students out of 218 that would have failed one class, but not enough classes to necessarily kick them out of, or not to put them in a position to earn less than 6 credits. We have only 6 students that would earn less than 6 credits, which is 2.7%, which gives us a 97.3% success rate of earning 6 credits if we ended today. Now, we still have 2 more marking periods, but that is a positive situation to have after midterms with your 9th grade class. So we are meeting that goal. So that's goal number 1. We are meeting the interim target, and because the interim target for marking period 2 is we just had to be at 85%, and we're at 97.3. So we're good there. MTSS is working, the intervention centers are working with these students, and the teachers are doing a really great job just staying on top of them to get making sure they're turning in their assignments. Goals 2 and 3 are related to our 12th grade IEP students. The first one was related to regular attendance. It's a goal that we had not measured previously, but we also put students that are economically disadvantaged in that category, which, while not a TSI identified group, is an at-risk group. So we wanted to measure attendance and try to have a target to get to the end of the year where we were at 70% average daily attendance for students with both IEPs and economically disadvantaged. We also wanted to then, and that's for all 4 grades, and then we wanted to make sure that through MTSS and through our intervention process, we want 85% of our students that have an IEP to pass all required courses for graduation by the end of the year. So where we are with those goals, here's the attendance goal. And I broke the 12th grade down just so you can kind of see this visual. This comes out of our Linkit model, our data warehouse. So right now, there's 67.3% of just our 12th grade. And then when we did, this goal is for all grades 9 through 12. 67.3% are on track. There's 18.4% that are in the warning, and there's 14.3% that are off track. Our average yearly attendance for the 12th grade is 88.4%. Our goal is 70%, but our quarter 2 target was 63.5%. So we are on track for our goal. Technically, the kids that are in warning are still on track, but I did not include them in our percentage because they are they're currently an at-risk group. So our 67.3 is the students who are strictly on track. If you added the 18% in there, we're much higher than that. They're still on track, but the magic number is less than 18 absences for the year, which is 10% of the school year. So anybody that's in the red right now, the 14.3%, they have more than 18 absences. Every one of those students, which is not many because we have a small special ed population, so that's about 7-8 kids right now, they have a story, generally speaking. There's a situation that has caused the attendance issues. The state does not delineate between excused or unexcused absences. So it doesn't matter if they have notes or anything, it still puts them in the on-track, warning, or off-track categories. So 12th grade, that kind of just is a breakdown of a grade level and what we kind of look at. SAFE plans and our MTSS team, we worked over the last couple weeks after we got this data quantified at the end of the marking period to start really focusing on that warning group in there and trying to make sure that we get ahead of it with our, a student attendance improvement plan if it hasn't occurred yet, which a lot of them are already in that. But that's kind of, we're on track with this goal.
Okay.
Frank, I'm not sure.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm not sure if everybody knows what a SAFE is.
A student attendance improvement plan is what a SAFE is, and a student attendance improvement conference is what you have to create the plan.
All right, thank you. I just want to be clear, so you just showed us a slide that said only 2% of students weren't passing, something like that, and that's not directly 12th grade students with IEPs, right? Because you have 2% who aren't passing, but 14% who aren't coming to school on a regular basis, but they're not the same numbers, am I?
It's not the same grade level.
Okay,
This is
all right.
12th grade, and that was 9th grade.
Thank you.
Yep. This one here is a combined look at our 11th and 12th grade students with IEPs and their attendance. They're averaging out about 70.85% on track. Grade 11 is at 74.4, and grade 12, as I just showed, is at 67.3. If you count the ones that are in the warning, we're well ahead of that goal, but we want to keep them in the warning and not put them in the off-track category. So grade 11 and 12 is on track. Grade 9 and 10 combined, again, this is IEP attendance for grade 9 and 10 is 68.25 combined for grades 9 and 10. And when you look at this as a whole, here's kind of the summary slide, which it makes it a little bit easier, I think. There's 1,035 students that are currently enrolled. We have 184 IEP students. Currently, they're 69.5%, 56% are on track after marking period 2. It does not include the students who are in the warning. Of the 1035, we have 209 economically disadvantaged students, and of that economically disadvantaged group, which is less important for our TSI goal, but I think is important, like for our TSI designation, but it is one of our goals, 69.8% of them are on track after marking period 2. Our quarter 2 target was 63.5. We met both of our goals. Our end of year target is a 70%. We are 0.2% away from getting there. And again, I did not include the students who are in the warning category who would factor into that percentage, but we want them to not go off track. So we're looking pretty good with attendance. I'm pretty confident at this point with 12 weeks to go, 13 weeks to go, that we're probably trending in the direction that we need to be to hit that 70% target. It is definitely an area in attendance that we need to really prioritize and work at. It is a constant issue at the high school level, especially. It is a thing that, you know, in 10 years, almost 10 years as an administrator, we see attendance as a major issue. It takes up, attendance-related issues take up 67.8% of our discipline. So we had 461 discipline referrals for the whole school year at this point. For example, I just ran this data today, and 67.8% of them are attendance-related. Late to school, late to class, class cut, etc. So it is a major, it's an area that you constantly need to work at, and it's good that we track this for at-risk groups. So we're on track to meet this goal. I'm not super concerned we're not going to hit that 70%. I'd like to honestly have a target higher than that, but you know, I think for a first-year monitoring the school is it's a good start.
Can I just ask what is probably a dumb question, but when you say IEP students, does that mean, like, what about gifted students? Do they count as IEP students?
They're counted as in the special education component, but they are not calculated in this. This is specifically special education students,
So
like
the
as in
kids getting learning support.
Learning support.
Okay, I didn't know if there was
Yep.
somehow also a group included in that.
No,
No.
as of for it's just the students with disabilities.
Just the disability, okay.
yeah, we can disaggregate data where we do a gifted, you can do a disaggregation, you can pull that data as well, but they are not included in this percentage.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. All right, so our next goal was IEP course success, which means, passing all classes. So if the year ended today, we'd have 11 students that would have at least, of our 12th grade IEP students, they failed to have at least one marking period failing grade out of 53. But only 5 of them would actually fail a class. So we're at 91, we're at 90.6% passing all scheduled classes right now. Our end of school year target is that's an 85%. So we are literally 5.6% ahead of our target right now that we have to hit at the end of the year. So we're trending we're in a good position here with our 12th grade IEPs, our IEP students. They're passing. I anticipate that number there will go down a little bit. I'm hoping. But there are circumstances. Those 5 kids count for quite a bit. They count for about 2% apiece because there's 53 students, and there are some situations there. So that's our data at present. Hopefully we stay there. Chapter 339 artifacts. So we measured, this was one of the other categories that we, obviously this is through Smart Futures. There's the set of artifacts that we inputted. The reporting year for this is grade 11. And the target group, the subgroup that we're looking at for this is our students with disabilities. So in running this data, our goal is that we want to have 90% of our students with disabilities complete all the required artifacts by the end of grade 11. So to run this data, to get a really good look, we run the 11th grade data in Smart Futures. So sharing this, so as of 2/12, when I ran this data, we have 275 11th graders. There's 30 students that have more to complete in Smart Futures overall. We have 41 IEP students. 7 of them have more to complete or at partial compliance. That puts us at 83% full compliance. Our target for quarter 2 was 83.5%. We are basically right there. We were 1 student away, but I want to point out that of the 41 IEP students, there's 31 that are completely through all the artifacts. They have nothing else to do. 3 of those students are low incidence students, and they don't complete the artifacts on Smart Futures. They have to complete an alternative assignment, which also goes into the factoring of the data. 7 require some additional activities, and one of the students who hasn't completed is outplaced, and we are actually reaching out to their placement to have them complete the artifacts there. So the other 30 students that
Let's
saw
say that was the one then.
that, well, there, yeah. So this is another one of those. It's a, you know, the 7 that we have in the building that they will pull us into where we need to be at with our data. The 3 and the 1 I'm not as worried about, but we meet individually with these students at this time of the year and we actually sit with them and have them complete what they need to complete. That's how we pretty much handle it when we get down to like 30 or less. So I'm gonna like say, I put that in pink, I didn't put it in red. It's like, cause we were like right there. It looks orange, but it's actually pink on the screen. So this is the one that we were like, ugh, but that's what the data shows as of right now. The last one was about instruction. This is one that we talked about when we did this plan. We really wanted to get some data on our instructional practices. The only way to do that is to get into classrooms and to start collecting data. So our targets were hitting 130 classroom visits per marking period. It's approximately 65 instructional staff with 2 visits per teacher. So at the end of quarter 1, we were at 146. And at the end of quarter 2, we've done 263 classroom visits between formal observations and walkthroughs. We've met that goal. We are averaging out. Every faculty member at the high school will have 8 classroom visits from administration by the end of the year, meaning we've been in your classroom collecting data on what you're doing for instruction at least 8 times. That has really generated a really interesting perspective. I'm going to share some of the data from we use a Google form to quantify the data, and it allows us to spit it out in some visuals. So I'm going to share some of that we also shared with the staff this week once we finished collecting the data and just kind of talked about some trends. It also will help build in some of our PLC conversations related to the comprehensive plan and some future discussion. So the staff has all seen this, and we kind of debriefed on it yesterday in our faculty meeting. And so first one is about domain 2A, it's about respect and rapport. 83.3% of what we saw indicated that was respect and rapport. 14.3%, we didn't observe that. Now that could be for a variety of reasons. It could have been because they were taking an assessment, there was no direct interactions, things like that. But overall, the teachers are creating a respect and rapport with students overwhelmingly, which is not surprising to see because we have great kids. So this is not surprising to see this piece of data. Classroom culture 2B, and I didn't share them all, I shared some interesting ones. Characterized by high expectations for most students. This is all out of Danielson. 71.7% we saw. We had 26.7% that we didn't. We just didn't observe it. Now this is a checklist format, so what I'll highlight on this is that we have a series of things that we have listed that we look for. And sometimes you might see something that just doesn't quite fall in that checklist, but there's also narrative feedback that we provide at the bottom. As soon as we do a classroom visit, we hit submit, the teacher immediately gets a copy of all the feedback. They get that immediately, and then we get a copy. It comes to them in a PDF. So they see everything that we've checked off, and they see our narrative comments. And then that also creates questions and discussion that we have with staff. But, generally speaking, we have high expectations.
What's the orange?
Orange is not observed, and then high levels of student, that's like the high, that's the higher level, the dark orange.
Yeah.
That's like where students are taking the lead in like as a significant part of the class.
Oh.
This is, we'll call that I hate to break it down like this, but like these domains are obviously distinguished, proficient, needs improvement, failing. That would be like pushing into that, what we would call like that distinguished level of domain 2B. The proficient level we're seeing 71.7% of the time. That's a good way to kind of frame it.
Thank you.
Through Danielson, but that's just this is an interesting one. Student behavior, and I said this, we didn't observe any redirection needed in 61.2% of the times that we were in classes. We didn't really see behavior happening. Of the classes that we saw behavior, where teachers had to like redirect or give input on standards of conduct or things like that, 37.6, they were clear. Teacher monitors the student behavior. Teachers, they responded to misbehavior. So about 61% of the time, we didn't see them having to respond to any misbehavior, but in the times that we did, they were responsive. We talked about that, in discussions for some of the PE offerings for next year, and just how we do respond to behavior. Questioning discussion techniques, 51.9%, sorry, it's a typo, we did not observe questioning techniques in practice. And that could be for a variety of reasons, like we could come in and the students could be actually in a group activity, the teacher's not really asking any direct questions. But it is important to note, like questioning and discussion is a really great basic sense of like checking for understanding, informative assessment to see if the students are really understanding things and following with the lesson. Of the ones we observed, 46.4%, most of the students, the questions are provoking a detailed response, allowing students to reflect on, the content or, expand on something that they're learning. So this is an area that we talked about as a staff, just related to questioning and making sure that we're using that as a formative assessment. And it's going to be instructional practice will be part of one of our PLCs next year, based on some of this input.
I mean, does this also show in a way that they're talking at the students?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
We talked about that, yeah.
Okay,
Yep. I don't have specific bullets in here related to that.
Sure.
But we began those discussions. One of the things, and that's this, especially with this next slide related to engagement, the way that our form works, we have like, I forget off the top of my head how many different ways you can engage students we have listed on the form. It's about, I want to say 15 to 20 different ways you can engage a student, like different styles of engagement. And if we don't see that, we check off we didn't observe any of those things. But the students could very well have been engaged, just not in anything that fits in one of our little boxes. But 75% of the time or so, we're seeing that. We're seeing active engagement. And then the other piece of it is we measure the amount of engagement. So of the engagement that we saw, we have it broken down with a percent of students that are actually engaged in class. So we literally count how many kids are visibly interacting in the material. And about 73% of what we did see for engagement is at 90 to 100% they're engaged. And that can look different. I mean, engagement looks a lot different for different kids. They can be working in a group activity, they can be taking notes, they can be taking a test, they can be writing a paper. I mean, there's so many different things they can do, but the main goal is that we want to see that 90 to 100% engagement with whatever activities the students are doing. 75 to 90%, that was about our other 20% there. So, this is again, and I said, like, this is all just collecting data. We're just trying to get a sense on what our instructional practice looks like. Assessment, of the time we were in there, a lot of times we're in there, we might not have seen assessment. We're seeing teaching, we're seeing group work. Now, this brought up an interesting conversation with our administrative team, because what I see as assessment versus what, two other administrators might see as assessment could be different. And so this also allows us to talk about consistencies on what we're looking for in the classroom. So like, if you're not seeing them physically complete an assessment, but they're doing questioning techniques, I might check off like that they're using assessment, using a style of assessment, but somebody else might not view that as assessment. They might be checking off not observed. So this was just a good conversation for us as a team, but of the assessment, we have such a wide range of assessment that's actually happening. So, and this is just this is this example, like these are all the different styles of assessment. Online measures, written assessments, checking for understandings, continuous, you can see that of the assessment we've observed, they're using a range of formative assessment, which is very nice to see that.
the 12%, there is no evidence.
That would be the area where, like, if they came in and for whatever reason we just didn't see that happening, and that's not necessarily a teacher thing, it could just be the point in the lesson where they just weren't really, you might have been there for 7 minutes doing a quick drop-in, and maybe they're doing direct instruction for that time, or they're having students complete, a reading, and they're reading a passage in a book, and they're not filling anything out at the moment, but they're reading, and maybe there wasn't a ton of questions. There's a lot of things that can hit there.
So if I were to combine, would it not necessarily be fair to say that it's a negative thing that between not evaluated and there is no evidence, we've got 30%?
Yeah, it's not necessarily a negative
Okay.
thing. It just comes down to the time of the lesson that you come in,
Right.
and the class and the period that you're in.
Okay.
You know, you could be there for the beginning of the lesson and they could be going over their power slide and going over the agenda for the day and doing a warm-up, and you just might not have seen a lot of the stuff that they're going to see 20 minutes into the lesson because you're there for the first 7-8 minutes. So
It's kind of like if your friend pops over and you're not doing dishes, and then your friend leaves and said, I never saw her do
never
dishes. She
cleaned,
doesn't do any dishes.
And the snapshot you see too, the other thing about classroom instructional data, I think that's really important is that, you know, we see snapshots of time. We don't see every single day. And that's really important when you're talking about it, because we're using this as a growth and a discussion piece of data. It's not meant to be punitive. It's just like, I'm going to put down, like, what do we see? We're going to be objective. We either see this or we don't. And then what does the data tell us? What are we seeing as a trend and what are we not?
And if I could just also say, it's one factor in classroom instruction. Sure. So the data days contribute to the sort of dialogue around, you know, are the instructional practices yielding growth for kids?
Yep.
And so that's why, you know, the commitment to get in there multiple times is also really important, not the same time, but different times, different kids. And I think, you know, we owe that to teachers to give them that feedback. And then it adds context to data days.
Yeah, for sure.
Data days.
Some days.
Last slide, number 20. We just have, just the last slide was just domain 3 based on flexibility and responsiveness. 59.9%, we observed this, they were being flexible. What this domain means is, you know, you're adjusting instruction on the fly, you're modifying and adjusting during the class period, you're responding to a student question, you're turning and talking, like you're allowing students to build on a discussion. But 37% we might not have observed this. Again, it just depends on the type of lesson we were in for and the time of day and the time of the lesson. So again, it's a great starting point for us to openly create a dialogue about instruction and also build out some of our professional development, which is what our main goal of collecting this data is. And we're going to have a whole other half of the year data to go on at the end. So we'll have like 550 classroom visits to really break down and kind of look at. So,
what's been the teacher feedback and to having somebody in their classroom that many times now?
I think that they like seeing us. There's times where they would probably tell you that it's nice to see administrators that are out in the building, because like I've been in buildings where administrators do not get out and about, and there's always a, you know, where are you kind of thing. So the fact that we're out and about and we're coming in and we're, you know, going around and we're stopping in. You know, I'll walk up and be like, hey, can I pop in for a minute? You know, it's not meant to be a major thing. You know, you just go in and they know they're going to get feedback because we have this going. So I think it's been generally positive. I think that there's a wait and see what we're going to do with the data kind of mentality and wait and see what these conversations are going to look like mentality, but I would expect that at this point. But I would hope overall, based on the fact that we have not engaged in if we haven't used the walkthrough data very evaluatively, like aggressively at this point, we're collecting the data. It's about looking at the building instructional practice as a whole, and as long as we stay there, I think that it's pretty positive so far. But again, I could be misreading it, but that's my general thought.
I think also some of the conversations that I have with the building administrators who are all doing walkthroughs now also is, how are we leveraging coaching? We have coaches in all of our buildings, some more at the elementary level than secondary, but you know, how do we support classroom teachers through coaches? What is the buy-in? Is there anything observationally that we could say, you know, we're not showing all the cards, but hey, questioning and discussion techniques, working with coaches to go to PLC meetings or going to, you know, department meetings at the secondary level and saying, here are some strategies. Do you want me to come in and model? Do you need some help with that? Do you need any resources? We're really trying to gain traction in building teacher capacity because we know that's who has the greatest impact on kids, without question. And so we're trying to make all those pieces fit, which is why this data is really important, although just one facet of overall improvement.
We also have some people that are doing some really awesome stuff that we really need to celebrate and highlight. And I think that you know, being able to be out in the building and see that is really been beneficial because it, you know, gives us perspective on, you know, who we can also maybe, you know, recruit to do some of that leading related to some of our really, you know, amazing strategies, whether it's a tech strategy or, you know, some type of assessment or project or things that teachers are really competent, you know, really excel in. And I think that that's another way you get that from being there, you have to see it, you know, so.
And do you have a way that you give those shout outs? Or is it just they get the feedback form, so that's it? Or
Yeah,
do you,
I
at a
generally-
staff meeting, you say like, hey, I saw Mr. So-and-so had a great lesson. Is there something like that in place or not?
I just did that yesterday with one of our teachers. I was like, yeah, I was in and I saw, you know, I was in associates and I'm like, yeah, you're doing an ear pod, and it was in the faculty meeting yesterday, and they were like, you know, it was like, whoa, like, you know,
Embarrassed
so.
but happy.
Yeah, I hope so. I was like, yeah, like doing a really awesome activity, like related to the 1960 election, and it was really cool. You know, the students were interacting, like we're all engaged in it, and teachers moving around, kind of like working through it with them, and it was it was, you know, cool to see that. So
I suspect that teachers like that.
I hope so.
I hope so.
Yeah.
You know,
Rather than feeling threatened, I mean, that's not the.
I
Sure.
don't think it will.
yeah, I mean,
Fred,
yeah.
it's kind of jarring if you hear your kid like, what? Why is he talking about me?
Yeah, I was like, not to put anybody on the
I
spot,
think
but.
that's a positive.
Yeah, no, I think hopefully it's been positive. We're gonna use it, we'll use it in some of our end of year conversations with staff too, when we do our end of year evals and meetings and kind of wrap up for the year too, and we'll use it to help us plan moving forward. So I've no doubt we're gonna continue to maintain this goal, for this one too. So, yeah, I mean, I feel like we're in a good spot as far as TSI goes. A lot of acronyms, sorry, TLS, TSI, FRCCS.
I feel like I did that exact thing earlier.
Yeah.
Just refresh my memory again about the sequence of when we get evaluated for TSI again and how that all plays out.
Yeah, so ultimately it happens in the fall every single year. So we will have to continue a revised plan to go through next year, and we'll learn well, they love to say it's September, October, but what that really meant this year was December.
Right before Christmas.
It was literally the week before winter break, so I don't know what's, you know, I guess it's the sophisticated math formulas. You know,
The averaging.
Yeah, and so, you know, it'll be sometime late fall, early winter. You know, but I think we showed that slide intentionally because we're hopeful that there's enough growth that it drops that. I mean, that 2023 year is holding us back significantly. So that'll drop off.
Yeah, like, was our 2020,
Right.
was our 2022 year? I mean,
I didn't
was
even-
that,
I
did we
did
just have
not-
a tank of a year, or was that
That's
are we
falling
on-
off.
It will fall off in the formula for this coming
The
fall.
fall
I just mean,
2025.
I'm saying,
Yeah, she's going back.
I want to know, going back,
We were
were
not.
we
We were
below
growing.
growth, or,
No, we haven't, I would have to look.
Oh.
I just am curious if we've
Yeah,
been
we only
tanking
pulled
for a
it,
while.
and we can pull his history, I think, to 20,
I think we can go back 4 years, I
Yeah.
think, yeah.
so.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, I mean, you know, finish up this plan. I'm anticipating based on this plan and based on the subgroup identified that our plan for next year will probably look very similar to this. Like, we might maintain some of these goals because these are the goals we have to focus on anyway. So it should be a pretty streamlined planning process. It'll just be looking at what our percentages are that we want, our targets.
And I will say, I think those two subgroups are subgroups, when we look K through 12, when we have measurable data, it is our students with disabilities and our students who are economically disadvantaged. Our other subgroup performance is similar to peers, but those two groups, and that's why you see it in our comprehensive plan too. And so there could be a whole host of reasons around that, but those are our two subgroups that seem to be historically underperforming.
Yep.
Good job. Yeah, thank you very
We'll
much.
see, but I appreciate it. Thank you. 2 more marking periods to go.
You're doing great.
Well,
Coming up on a year, right? April is.
it's been a fun year.
Yeah.
So, you know, I had a next step slides in here, but it's, you know, we're going to continue to work with MTSS and work on attendance support, classroom presence and data collection, working with instructional coach, TLS, monitoring for quarter 3 and 4, one-on-one work with Smart Futures, which we talked about with that goal to get that completed. And we're actually awaiting our Keystone retake data from January because we had the first group of students retake Keystone in the winter here. It's a small group, but they were our bubble students, so the first ones that piloted the digital Keystone exam. So that's going to be interesting because, they say when you implement, digital testing, that you can see a little bit of a different performance. So we're going to have to wait and see how that looks comparatively. I'm hoping that comes in, like, it's got to be soon. I mean, that's usually pretty quick, so it's got to be soon we get that data file back. So we'll be looking at that to see where that came from and kind of go from there. So those are our steps.
And I will say, as you know, and we'll pivot to this next slide, which, my friend Frank is also here for, but, in the absence of our CNI department, and you count on all of us to do that, but you also know that we've been making some structural recommendations around how, knowing that there are particular content areas where students with disabilities continue to lag in performance. The Algebra 1, you saw it in the program of studies, there was a recommendation to change that model. With that comes the need for an additional resource. Our K-12 math review is underway. You saw you'll see next month the K-5 recommendation. You saw CPM 2 years ago. It's in its second year of implementation. The high school has yet to be a part of the curriculum review in mathematics, and so it was a challenge. And so Frank and I talked right out of the gate this year, and we said we have to get the math department at the high school on board with focusing on Algebra 1. It is a course at the high school that has not been written since I was overseeing curriculum. That was a really long time ago. And so...
Well, what are they on the cycle? Because then we have I know Kim had showed us that before the cycle of reviewing the curriculum, for all that.
They did not participate. And so we needed to...
Why?
How does that happen?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay.
But now, so at the beginning of this year, I said, we have got to get Algebra 1 addressed. We are making a structural recommendation. With that, we need to make sure the planned course is updated and that they have the most recent resource. If you ask a high school math teacher who teaches Algebra 1 right now, they'll tell you they don't have any resource.
They're pulling together a whole bunch of supplemental materials right now from different resources that are a variety of, what they can find. If they, I think there's some older books lying around. I don't know when the last time they bought an Algebra 1 book or had an
So it was
actual
before I got here,
book.
and that was 2015.
Let me
So
ask
it's
the question.
at least 10 years.
If, from this point forward, you are in that review cycle and someone decides they don't want to participate, what is our collective response to that?
Yeah, I think we found a nice formula in working with them. Frank's done a really nice job in sitting down with the department. There's a different kind of data culture around the course. I also think they recognize that when your building principal has some ownership in things, and I'm not saying Dr. Carpenter didn't, but right now we asked Frank to lead this process as the building principal. And so I think it created a nice sort of conversation for people and a trust. I mean, as a high school teacher, when your principal asks you to help, you're really kind of willing to go out of the way. And so, and they also did not like the recommendation of CPM. There was a breaking point.
Yeah, it was for a variety of reasons based on the group of students that we're targeting programming for at the high school in Algebra 1.
Yeah, and we weren't
say
part of
that
that discussion, but I do think working with building administrators to encourage people to participate I think it pays dividends, truthfully.
So Frank, let me ask you kind of, So the algebra teachers are saying, we don't like what we're not, this isn't the best we could have, right? But like, as in, you were an English teacher, and, right, in the past, yeah. And for me, I don't know that I need a curriculum necessarily for me to pull resources. Like, I have a fantastic curriculum that I put together myself. So let me just be clear, for the algebra teachers, that's not the song they're singing. They're saying, we really would like a curriculum, because math obviously is different from.
Yeah, so math, it's very, so what we were looking for with this process is we're dealing with the general work. So there, I'm gonna break math into like 3 buckets. So we have the high-flying, high-achieving math students that take Algebra 1 at the middle school level. So by the time they get to high school, they're already out, they're in either Algebra 2 or geometry, or even further, depending on how advanced they are. We have a few that are in, pre-calc in 9th grade, like they're just, flying high, right? Then we have, looking at the data, you have a group of students that you would call in the middle that are, let's call, that they weren't performing at a proficient level high enough at the middle school level to take Algebra 1 by 8th grade. So they might be, let's call it at like a basic level where they weren't ready for Algebra 1, but by the time they get to 9th grade, they're at, a basic level. They have a basic understanding of pre-algebra. They can probably take, Algebra 1 in a complete course. Then you have the below basic group, which was of your incoming class, 60, sometimes even more than that, that based on their performance, they were taking proficiency algebra, which was a double period of Algebra 1 which was every day for math. The data showed that they were not passing Algebra 1 and they were not successful in the Keystone even with the double period. And when we started investigating it with the teachers, with the staff, and I said, well, what are we doing consistently? Like, what is the resource that we're doing? What assessments are available with the resource? Because with the resource, you get summative assessments that are standards aligned. You get pre-tests.
Consistency,
You can pre-test
costs,
the unit on
teachers,
standards.
okay.
You get online components that are available that you can access to be able to use. There's just stuff you get as part of a resource, and because our resource is being pulled together it's like a melting pot of Algebra 1 resources, and a lot of it is what you're saying. They put together their own resources, but it's difficult to create a consistent approach and get consistent data on curriculum or program.
I guess I'm saying it doesn't super scare me that they wanted to opt out of whatever and they were putting their stuff.
Yeah.
It doesn't frighten me, but if they are literally saying, the data is saying, we need consistency.
And just for clarity, we have a written course.
We do.
Algebra 1 course. What we don't
the
have is a
concepts,
consistent reference text
Okay.
that has consistent assessments that are standards aligned and to the DOK, to the rigor of the standards.
Right.
And so what they said in our very first in-service this year was, we don't even have, so it's not consistent, and that's not fair to kids.
Yeah, the very first data day
Sure.
that we had, we started talking about some of the performance across the standard bands where the students were performing at like a 4th grade level in 9th grade, taking the benchmark in numbers and expressions. They were not passing a basic numbers in base 10, numeracy. They weren't able to pass that standard. And we started talking about, well, how does that look? What kind of resources do we have? Can we get is there a remedial resource we can engage? Things like that. And then they were like, well, we don't even have a book that we have for Algebra 1 that we're using right now consistently. So then that really kicked open me kind of, working with Dr. Freena to just engage the conversation with the math department, like, hey, what do you guys want, where are we at with this? Because our data shows the proficiency doesn't work. So, and our students that are in Math 1 and 2 are not getting access to core instruction. So that's what you saw in January when we proposed splitting Algebra 1 in half so we can access Math 1 and 2 can get core and they can get remediation, which they're not able to get, which is another, anywhere from they're all generally all IEP students, and
Students
between
with higher level
needs, and they're all supposed to take the Keystone, but they're not getting any core instruction. So when we started kicking this around, and talking to the math department, and looking around at other districts and how they've kind of engaged in the math, performance situation, that's where we kind of started talking about a curriculum, review and a resource, because trying to get them all with one here we go, we have a resource, we have, you know, standard assessments, you know.
I see the value of that, I just,
Yeah.
I think it's important that you listen to what the teachers are saying. If that's what the teachers are
Yep.
saying, that's what the data is saying.
Yep.
Like, it's also okay if teachers can put together a curriculum that they like and they can pull it.
Well, they pick this,
And that, yeah.
and they're writing the document, so like that's important to me, like, so the way that I try to approach curriculum, at least from my experience, is you engage the staff, like, you provide a framework, engage in a lot of conversations, we had them do some demos with the resource companies that they previewed, and eventually got to this point tonight. So it's been it's been very productive, and the math department, I think, has been really receptive to this. I'm hoping that we get a good product, and
Okay.
Is this the kind of thing where we're gonna leave it out for?
So it is, so this is the introduction, we have their checklist, the
Yeah.
teacher checklist who reviewed, and so we always present it to the committee, we leave it out, because there was money in the budget, in the curriculum and instruction budget for the purchase of the resource, because it was intentionally a K-12 math review, but this will be the only high school text recommendation at this point. Middle school will stay with CPM, and then you will hear in March, Amplify, or I'm sorry, not Amplify, iReady is the math, and there's like volumes of materials. So I said, let's do that separate, because there's a lot.
iReady
there.
is math? Middle school?
K to 5.
K to 5.
Yep.
Okay.
Speaking of listening to teachers, it was slated for a full-scale adoption in September, but they just adopted Amplify and have, we're supposed to go into ELA. They're like, timeout.
Amplify for science, and so.
We can't handle this.
Okay.
So we'll talk next month about a phased implementation, because they are definitely overwhelmed adopting that many resources in such a short time.
Makes sense.
see, I don't know, I mean, I know we
So
have.
we just wanted to introduce it, let you ask about any of the processes. We do have 2 writers to align our written units of study to the reference text once it's approved, and those are Meredith Wickard and Emily Danko, who are our high school teachers. And we have some support from the IU in best practices in mathematics to make sure it's vertically aligned back to K through 5, or K through 8, which is a legitimate conversation that needs to happen here. And then it'll sit out, and then we'd like the committee to, move it for adoption and approval at the board.
Does that mean you're looking right now?
Well, do you support us leaving it out for 30 days for inspection? It will be here.
Do we need a motion for that? or
I think it's
for
always
that?
safe to approve it to move forward.
Yeah, this is the whole kit, it's a teacher kit, it's
Yeah,
what's, it's got the student work, the workbooks, there's an online component that kind of echoes what's here, but it's a Holton Mifflin Harcourt book called Into Algebra 1. They previewed, we started thinking we were going to go in a different direction with a program called Essentials of Algebra, which is not a Holton, it's not an HMH book, and it's a prescriptive book which builds in remediation, but it really wasn't going to solve both Algebra 1 and Algebra 1A and B, where we're doing that split. So we eventually kind of like moved into, kind of reaching out, and, the IU contact, a lot of the districts that have done what we're doing are using this reveal model. They use the reveal book. So we kind of paired that. We looked at Essentials, we looked at Reveal, and then they looked here, and they primarily reviewed these 2 resources. They're 2 of the most standard resources for Algebra 1 that we could locate, and kind of got to this point. They liked the staff met with HMH, did a really nice presentation, previewed some of the unit assessments, which are all standard aligned. There's pre-tests, comes with a full package of resources. It seems to be, it's very direct, it's very straightforward approach to teaching Algebra 1, which is what this group of students specifically needs. So that's kind of just a summary for you. They did a great job. They've been really helpful, cooperative, and they're poised to write the document. So
So I would be looking for a motion
So I'll make that motion.
great,
Leave it out for
The
review.
motion is what?
to leave this out right now and start the 30-day review process. And then we'll take it to the board for approval once that review process has concluded.
Second?
Any questions or concerns, discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, great. Motion carries.
Talk fast.
Yeah.
I think I may be done now.
Okay,
That's a long 20 slides, Frank.
The comprehensive plan in 5 minutes or less. No, really, this is really ultimately just a reminder around the work of comprehensive planning, which began earlier this fall. What has been shared in our last stakeholder meeting was about 2 weeks ago. And we just wanted to give a quick snapshot and then inform the community of where they can find it online to give feedback, because this too sits out for 30 days for public comment and review. But just so everyone knows, there were 4 priorities that were found out of all of the work of the stakeholder group, plus additional internal district committees. And those are future readiness, well-rounded students, operational excellence, and building community partnerships. And so there's a description of each of those priority areas. What you see in the center is work around portrait of a graduate. So one of the tasks of the stakeholder group out of the gate was based on the feedback from the high school students and the community around what is the purpose of the district and what do kids need when they graduate. And so this was the ideation of that group around a portrait of a graduate. And really it's a graphic that represents the district and what we hope to achieve with kids. We did not have one prior to this stakeholder group, so we're excited. We're excited for that.
Yeah.
At the bottom, you'll see the tagline, which, by the way, it went through a bunch of groups, but then ultimately students were surveyed for which of the taglines they wanted, and the clear winner was learning today, leading tomorrow. And so, that is a byproduct of kids' feedback, which I think is lovely. So what is comprehensive planning? So within each of those priority areas, you will see there are goals assigned. So in future readiness, really what we're looking to do is to continue MTSS to enhance proficiency in ELA and mathematics, specifically around of all kids, but we will monitor and measure students with disabilities and students who are economically disadvantaged. And then one of the big goals is really in the area of mathematics, ELA, mathematics, and science, to have our assessments be standards aligned and vertically articulated. And so what that means is that those learning progressions, or what kids are learning, build and align to the expectations of the standardized assessments. Currently, we do not have that all the way through secondary, K-12. We have that very solidified K-5. And then sporadically at the secondary level. So that is something that we feel really strongly needs to be our focus. That way when we come and tell you about this data, you trust that all of the assessment kids take, and they take a lot, are all getting them toward the goal for the district, and we see our student achievement improve. Well-rounded students. Really the hope of this goal, or the target of this goal, is to diversify the instructional and programmatic opportunities available to students to ensure more high school students report a relevance between secondary coursework and opportunities and preparedness for college and career following graduation, as measured by an annual high school student survey. So what our data told us from kids was that they don't see a lot of relevance between what we're asking them to learn and their future. And so the goal is really to diversify, understand those needs of kids, and then create opportunities to make sure that they know that I'm taking this class. And I think it's fair to say we all asked that question at one point, why am I learning this? You know, I don't know
Yeah,
if I ever
adults-
got an answer,
We
but
see it, but kids don't, and they
Yes.
see it less in the last 4 years.
yes, agreed.
Significantly less, so it's, you have to take sort of a multi-pronged approach to, you're trying to change perception of something that you know why this is good, but they need to know it, so.
Yeah.
That's a good goal.
And then to increase the percentage of students, staff, and parents that report positive school environment and experiences as measured by a district survey. A baseline will be established in the spring of '25, and then we'll repeat the survey annually. Right now, there was a student survey and a community survey given as part of the comprehensive plan. I think there is work on, we don't have the instrument right now that we would repeat, and so we've got to talk about what that
For the
instrument.
survey?
Yeah. So I think we have to talk about that instrument that we will administer, make sure it's giving us the data that we need. Community partnerships is really to strengthen our collaboration with the Ed Foundation. I will say I got some feedback already that, hey, you left out some huge community partners, so please include us. And so, you know, like the Chamber of, who is a huge partner of ours. Oops, that will be noted and changed, as well as alumni, and really focusing on our communication and branding efforts in the district around those partnerships and alumni, and to really try to re-engage them back in district events, and then to enhance our outreach and participation of families in district events who are also accessing resources. What we see is there's a lot of things offered. Sometimes they report that they don't see that. And we certainly don't see a lot of people attending some of those things. So I think we need to make a really intentional effort on how do we enhance parents engaging or families engaging in those activities. We see a lot in interscholastic athletics. We don't see a lot in our parent trainings or some of our more academic trainings that we hold. Then operational excellence, really we want to make sure we're at the tier 2 level of all of PCCD's physical security standards. That is something that I have been working on, and I'm happy to report we're really close. But I think there is some efforts we need to make. Most of that work is aligned to grant funding. And so, you know, we want to make sure we're at no less than a tier 2 in all of the expected areas. And I present those at facilities a lot. But we also need a multi-year facilities plan. We know kids learn in healthy environments that really reflect and make available, you know, good instruction. And I think it's really important that our facilities director and team committee has a long-range plan. And then technology is also really important, both end user students, but also cybersecurity measures to enhance the learning environment. So I share those goals because within each of those goals are sub-plans. So I'm going to encourage everyone to please give us feedback. You'll go on and you'll see action plans and professional development aligned to each of those areas. And so that's a really quick review.
Okay.
But here, please, please, please. This is currently active on the district homepage, even though I missed it. I said, I can't find it, Alexis. She's like, literally, it's the biggest box on the page.
It's
huge.
Yeah, it was not, you know, me and technology. But
It's just.
this is really important because we are collecting feedback and trying to identify themes that then we would adjust the plan. So that will be out until March 14th. There will be a board presentation of the revised plan on March 27th. It'll be up for approval, and then we would need to submit that to the Pennsylvania Department of Education by March 31st to begin implementation July 1st. So that was over time, I'm sorry.
That's
But
okay.
this is really important, and we really do want feedback.
One quick question about the college and career readiness.
Yes.
Part of implementation is hinging on SEL. which in K through 8 uses second step. So I just wanted to ask if you would set out the second step program for review. Were you going to mention that anyway?
Yes, I was. I'm sorry, thank you.
Yeah,
I was like trying to go so fast.
that's okay.
So we have the second step materials. We did this last year at EPS and no one came. I just want to put the disclaimer out. It's a lot of materials. But we will lay them out. At the March, I would ask for us to give an overview because we can show you the units of study. It's actually on our website already. And then we will have the materials out again here. They'll be out over at on that side at the Ed Center, but we want to sort of give you access to all of it because our middle level is digital.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, just, I don't communicate that when it's out,
Yeah.
ready.
but you
available.
can go on the website now and it'll show, it has links to all of our second step materials and shows you the units of study that we cover.
All right, we are at time. So unless anybody has any burning public comment this evening, we're gonna, I'll
We
ask.
skipped
Yeah.
Carol.
I know, Carol, I'm just gonna assume, Carol, and tell me if I'm wrong, that you were just gonna say the two things in number 5.
No, I have like a few slides.
You liar. All right.
Hair training.
Don't scare us like that. No, I
These are the
appreciate it.
next two, and the
Yes.
session's coming up.
Thank you very much. Anything else from the board members before we adjourn? Entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Second.
Fantastic. Questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, thanks, everybody. Next meeting, March 20th. We really appreciate everybody's participation.
Thanks, Frank.
Yeah, thanks, everybody.
Talked a lot, I'm sorry.
That's good, that's good stuff.
15, I'll prepare 15 next time.
That's it, no, we're not inviting you back, that's it.
No, the last 2 meetings, it's like, I'm like, oh, man.
You can buy your.
How are you?